Jendula Pinjuru Sanjendo Shu Namola Yekina Lulu Nujunge to Madame Migina. To Kunjitana Chinamba, Tanji Kedu Dagishi and the Tumatilla Sandrashi di Shuedan Jadi Yahuchi in Yunguna Mena. Jadi Yunguna. Dine daring around to Cheje Jongi Tsandi, Peshin Dinere. Dada Rangri Lusenga she say Dinerwa, Cousin Tiba de la Saredis. Di Jungmushi Tsandi, Dinema Chadi Gore. Dajer Sanjebi Chu say the Cousin Yeman Shuganashi. Number Sanjebi Chu say di, Janda Nibudi. 国际恰安迪呢，就是两年的假期呢，如果的开始不是下，那去的你不的国的恰期呢，你国的属于的上流南路了，最大度两年样都上路当期呢，你当地的山地，几上呢几上，当地的属属
becomes clearer and clearer in the mind. So the meaning of the Dharma. So, and also the meaning of the Dharma, the mind that realizes the meaning, so that gets kind of deeper and deeper, it gets greater and greater, so that you can proceed through the different paths, the path of accumulation, path of preparation, and so forth. So, with regard to our mind, so our mind will change, will transform, and now this mind we have now, this ordinary mind that is under the control of the afflictive emotions, that should be transformed. The afflictive emotions are incredibly strong. There's so many different types of afflictions. So attachment, aversion, jealousy, and so forth. There's so many different types of afflictions that our mind is influenced by those. So we should learn for our mind to not be caught by these afflictions. So our mind right now is too strongly affected by the afflictive emotions. It's kind of binding our mind without any control. So we need to learn the Dharma, think about the Dharma, and in particular the essence being the view of selflessness. So with regard to the emptiness, the mind that realizes emptiness, wisdom, and then also of course bodhicitta, the root of which is great compassion. So these two really, the selflessness and bodhicitta, those are really the main two aspects of Buddhism. That's what we should meditate on in order for our mind right now that is bound by the rope of afflictions, that these afflictive emotions will distance, or our mind will distance itself from these afflictive emotions, and with these aspects of bodhicitta and so forth, enhance and transform. So first we generate bodhicitta, that's the path of accumulation, and then we train continuously in bodhicitta, and together with that we practice the six perfections, in particular the perfection of wisdom, of concentration and wisdom, and we train ourselves more and more in those, and until they're really strong, so that we can engage in the practices of a bodhisattva in such a way that they're irreversible, so that there's a strong wish to continue with the practice, and that we won't fall from those activities of a bodhisattva with great determination. And so then we move on to from the small path of accumulation, we move on to the middling path of accumulation, where the bodhicitta is really strong. And then on top of that, we need to train in the union of calm abiding and special insight. So for that, we need to first meditate on calm abiding, so that through our meditation, calm abiding is generated, so that once we bring it together with emptiness, then once we have the union of calm abiding and special insight, that's the first moment of the path of preparation. And when we have reached that level, we continuously familiarize with this mind, so that we go through the 4 stages of the path of preparation, So in other words, this mind that is the union of karma, abiding, and special insight, it increases so that at some point this union becomes a mind that directly realizes emptiness. So the union of karma, abiding, and special insight, directly realizing emptiness, that marks the path of seeing. Once we reach that, we reach the path of seeing. And through this wisdom realizing emptiness directly, we eliminate particular coarser types of mind, like intellectually acquired, self-grasping, and so forth. And so once we've eliminated them, we reach the path of release, of the path of seeing. And we were in this non-meditative state, we then practice the 6 perfections. And so in particular, merit, we need to accumulate a lot of merit, the extensive merit. And then when we do that in this non-meditative, in this post-meditative state, at some point when we continue then to enter again, if we then enter again into that direct realization of emptiness, at that point, that's the path of meditation. And on the path of meditation, using the realization of emptiness, the direct realization, we start to eliminate the innate obstructions to liberation, the innate obstructions to enlightenment. So those we've had since beginning this time, obstructions since beginning this time, they need to now be eliminated. And it is through this direct realization of emptiness combined with bodhicitta that we can eliminate those innate obstructive emotions. So this means that the wisdom realizing emptiness directly is supported by bodhicitta. And in that way, we can expand our activities of body, speech, and mind in the way of a bodhisattva. So assisted by the wisdom of emptiness, the wisdom realizing emptiness, which supports those. So they increase the method aspects of our practice. And so with regard to compassion, bodhicitta, so realizations and self-confidence and so forth. So there are many different kind of aspects which are assisted by concentration. So all these mental qualities, especially the extensive, for instance, generosity, ethical conduct, patience, enthusiastic effort, and so forth. So all these extensive qualities, they will be enhanced by the wisdom realizing emptiness, which is conjoined with it. So in that way, the methods will be complete. And so these methods, these aspects of the practice that are called methods, they will become more extensive, they become more complete in that that we expand our practice becomes extremely extensive, and through the direct realization of emptiness, we're able to go through the different bhumis, through the different grounds, so that on each ground, the wisdom realizing emptiness directly is able to eliminate certain stages of obstructions preventing us from attaining liberation or enlightenment, until the last moment. We're able, like the last time that a bodhisattva enters this meditative absorption of realizing emptiness, the bodhisattva will then completely eliminate the subtlest obscurations or cognitive obstructions, and that means the moment attaining the state of a Buddha. And that way, when we think about the stages of the path, so Rinpoche said, I just talked about it in a very simple way, kind of to easily kind of present this, but actually we need to start off with generating great compassion, and then of course bodhicitta, and then also generate an understanding of selflessness. So in that way, bodhicitta and selflessness, those are the essences of, this is the essence of Buddhist practice. And with regard to selflessness, understanding selflessness, to understand what selflessness means, well, once we can understand that, then these strong afflictive emotions, such as attachment and so forth, they will be slightly reduced. So right now we have these really strong afflictive emotions, so many, the 20 types, the 6 types, and so forth. And so what does that mean? Our mind will be disrupted by the different afflictive emotions the moment they arise. So based on self-grasping, then the other afflictive emotions arise, and our mind just gets disrupted, gets distorted. So for instance, our body, So we say our body, our mind, these five aggregates, they're like a burden. It's said that they're like a burden. So when you, for instance, if you put on your shoulders like a heavy load, if you have to carry that for just 1 minute, it's difficult, and then it gets worse after 2 minutes, after 3 minutes. This burden gets stronger and stronger. So the longer you have to carry this load on your back, the stronger it feels, like a load, like a burden, and it becomes harder and harder. So similarly, we carrying this mind and this body, and they're a burden to us. They give us so many problems, so many endless sufferings, and that's why it's because we're having mind and body. That's why we suffer. And so where do we get this body and this mind from? It's from the afflictive emotions. So in the past, we generated different afflictive emotions arose, and then from that we accumulated karma, and that gave rise that gave rise to being reborn, and in the sense of being reborn in samsara, having the wish to continue to exist. So when we accumulate negative karma, for instance, we are reborn in the lower realms. And then why we're born in the lower realms? Because of negative karmic actions. So our mind, the reason, so why are we reborn in the lower realms? It was attachment at the time of death. So we had desire to be reborn, and then due to the karma we've accumulated, we were reborn in the lower realms. So in short, everything is dependent on afflictive emotions. Afflictive emotions, in turn, they were caused by self-grasping, by the self-grasping attitude. And it's through understanding selflessness, hearing about selflessness, and then thinking about selflessness, that we can overcome this. So the stronger our understanding of selflessness becomes, the more we're able to reduce our afflictive emotions. In particular, with the wisdom realizing selflessness. So being the basis, using that as the basis. So we don't harm others, we don't engage in any kind of violent actions. Instead, we engage in actions benefiting others, and that is the basis for bodhicitta. So to generate love and compassion, loving kindness towards others, towards all sentient beings, and generate compassion for all sentient beings. So to think of others like our relatives, so it's not just, but not because they benefit us, but mainly because they have suffering. So understanding they have problems, they have suffering. Based on that, we meditate on compassion. So whether someone is our enemy, or someone is someone close to us, or they're like a stranger to us, we should generate and understand. We should generate an attitude of focusing on all sentient beings in the future. So without having a sense of like a limited time frame, but to understand that since beginning this time, also in the future, until the end of cycle existence, or as long as space remains, we should see sentient beings. We should generate compassion in the future, but also understand that in the past, sentient beings since beginning of time have been really close to us. So sentient beings who are endless and as endless as space. So they've always been our mother. They've acted as our mothers. They've always been kind to us. They've been our father. They've been our mother. They've been our siblings. So they've been extremely kind, and their kindness is as vast as space. So we shouldn't think we don't need to depend on them. So there's not a single sentient being that at some point we didn't have to depend on. So all sentient beings, they're a base for our existence. So the whole world, we need other sentient beings. So whether we're in school or go to hospital, other sentient beings are necessary for our well-being. So we need so many causes and conditions to be able to study, and for that we need other sentient beings. So society is so important. In that way, if we think of, like, if we have an extensive view, we should think that all sentient beings are like our parents, not just for a short time, but for a long time. And we should also have this attitude that's beginning this time, they've been so kind to us. So there's no limit in terms of past and future. We should have this attitude towards all sentient beings and think of sentient beings like our parents, and how remember or be aware of how kind they were. So they're all the same in general. All sentient beings are the same, that they don't want to suffer, just like we are. We don't want to suffer, we want to be happy. So for instance, when we have compassion with ourselves, well, we understand we don't want to suffer, and we have the wish to be free from free from this kind of suffering. So in that way, we generate compassion for ourselves. And likewise, with regard to other sentient beings, they're just like us. They don't want to suffer. They don't want to have problems. In the same way as we focus on ourselves, we should focus on other sentient beings. The reasoning is the same. They don't want to suffer. They don't want to have problems. So therefore, this compassion should be the same towards each sentient being. And if we really generate that kind of beneficial attitude, it becomes very extensive. So it's a kind of compassion that equals the space. So we should generate this mind of compassion, which turns into bodhicitta. There's no greater warm-heartedness than that. There's nothing greater, there's nothing more extensive than that mind. So this extensive mind, the expansive mind, is that there's no discrimination, there's no difference. It's not like I want to benefit this person or that person. It doesn't arise. It's for all sentient beings indiscriminately, and it's so vast. It's as vast as the space, being so expansive. Then when there are problems arise, then we see problems, our own problems, we just see them as little problems, as little difficulties. And so we won't lose our determination. We'll be determined. So we won't think, I have so many problems and so forth. We will come to think that, oh, it's just my problem. It's just one person's problems. So this kind of very narrow-minded attitude won't arise. Why? Because our mind has become so expansive. So our attitude is just so expansive and extensive, so that we can actually give up. Well, we may think that we have to give up ourselves, but we have a sense that that we will have to suffer if we generate compassion. But that's absolutely not the case. That's not true. That's a misunderstanding. We don't have to give ourselves up. We don't have to sacrifice ourselves. But actually, it means that our mind doesn't get disrupted, that we're not so narrow-minded. That's what it means to generate compassion. Actually, usually our mind is disrupted, it's distorted, and we have problems, we give problems to other people. So we're not able to, if someone harms us, we get impatient and so forth. So we shouldn't generate that kind of anger and so forth. So instead, we should open the eyes of wisdom, and we should think, what can I do? Does it really, should I retaliate if someone harms me? What is the harm? What is the harm if I retaliate someone? Does it help this other person? Does it help myself? So I will have more problems if I retaliate. More and more problems will arise. And so based on that understanding, based on wisdom, and understanding, I won't retaliate, I won't confront the other person. So if we could do this, we'll generate patience instead, and our mind will be very calm. Our mind will be calm and relaxed. It won't be distorted, it won't be destroyed, it won't be distorted or just distraught. Instead, it will be very calm. And if we can keep that kind of mind, whatever activity we engage in, we'll be able to engage in it effectively. We'll be able to engage it in an appropriate way, so that whatever activity we engage in, it will be done in an appropriate way. So that's what we need to do. This is where compassion helps. So when we talk about meditating on compassion, on patience, then we'll naturally generate inner peace. So even if externally we're being insulted and so forth, our mind will remain calm. So when another person, for instance, insults us, then we can think about, okay, this person says this to me. Okay, so what are they saying? To really reflect on the words of the other person, even if they're insulting. So we have, with compassion, we have this inner calm, this inner peace. And with regard to meditating on patience, so first, when we're compassionate, when we have patience, when we have compassion and so forth, it helps mainly ourselves. The moment they arise, the first moment they arise, it benefits us. We don't know whether they benefit others, but 100% these mental attitudes, they will benefit ourselves. So if we generate patience, we meditate in the correct way on patience, on compassion and so forth, 100% they will benefit us. So our mind won't be destroyed, our mind won't be disrupted. Instead, we'll be able to keep calm and attentive and so forth. So therefore, meditating on patience, meditating on compassion, meditating on wisdom. So wisdom in particular, we should generate what's reality, what happens. So that doesn't mean to give up ourselves. So to give up our own well-being and only focus on other sentient beings. That's not the meaning of this. When we say thinking of others, so we should think that others in relation to oneself, others are more important. So as mentioned before, all these sentient beings since beginning this time and also for the future, so without beginning, without end, they're like our mother, they're greater than our mother, kinder than our mother. So in that way, we should think along these lines and have this very open-minded attitude. So most important, we talk about important and most important. So what is, if we have to choose between the two, important and most important, we would choose most important. So other sentient beings are most important. So to have an attitude that is as vast as space with regard to other sentient beings. And so with regard to ourselves, there's no greater benefit. So it will benefit ourselves. There's no other mind that is more beneficial. There's no other means, no other method to generate or to benefit ourselves. If we only think of ourselves, the benefit we get from that, in comparison to thinking of all sentient beings, well, the latter is so much more beneficial. And so even though we directly focus on other sentient beings, like a side effect, we will be happier. So actually, if we just work for our own benefit, it certainly that's just for one person. We just work for one person, and that's too narrow-minded. If we think of all sentient beings, then we will have, as a side effect, we will then also gain the benefit. We'll have all the benefits. So, for instance, it's like a seed. If we plant a seed, like a good seed, and then add water and look after the seed, then automatically the tree will grow, like an apple tree will grow. So, and then apples will grow and so forth. So if we do this, we really look after this well. So once we have apples, then with regard to the leaves, each leaves on this tree. So we don't have to do anything special. It will be like a side effect. Like once you plant the seed, you will have all the different aspects of this tree. Anyway, it becomes too extensive, but Rinpoche says that. So with regard to the essence of Dharma, it's selflessness and bodhicitta. That's the essence. So this is just a general explanation. So there seems to be among today's scholars some caught in a web of words like thoroughly withstanding and true existence, seek only to negate some creature of forms by leaving intact this everyday appearance of solidity. That was verse 10 and then 11. I'm sure it's right 11. So to explain this here. So when we study the text of the Madhyamika, so we come to understand the view of emptiness, the view of the middle way is very important. And so when we study about this, so we hear, okay, the object of negation is true existence. And so when we negate that, that's emptiness. So what do we need to negate? True existence. we're not negating conventional truth. So, for instance, with regard to the vast, we should negate the true existence of the vast, not the vast. So we hear this all the time. This is what the texts tell us. So what we need to do to negate is the true existence of the vast and not the vast. So it's not okay to negate the vast or the pillar or any other conventional truth. So when we hear that, so whatever appears to us, there's a sense we leave everything that appears to us, we leave it the same way. So it seems like the true existence is something over there. So the vast is over here, everything, the way the vast appears to us, that remains the same. And there's this true existence somewhere over there. That's how it appears to us. So for instance, as beginner, we're beginners. So as beginners, if we think about it, whatever appears to us, everything appears to us as being truly existent. So as if it existed in and of itself from its own side. Whatever appears to us appears in that way. When there's a pillar appears to us as inherently existent, as in and of itself existent. A vase exists that appears that way, and so forth. So we say the way, how does pillar appear to us? It appears as a truly existent phenomenon. So it doesn't appear separately. It appears, the appearance of the vase is the appearance, it's mixed with the appearance of an inherently existent vase. So therefore, things don't appear to us without the appearance of the object of negation. So when we, for instance, take the pillar, it seems that when we negate true existence of the pillar, we eliminate the pillar. So some people generate fear when they hear, oh, so there's a pillar and it appears to me. So there's a sense that everything will disappear. We generate fear of negating true existence. It seems that everything gets lost. So with regard to oneself, there's a sense that if I don't exist truly, then I disappear. So a fear of losing oneself. There's a sense I will lose the I. And this fear may arise as when people meditate on emptiness. So this fear should arise. So when you understand I don't exist truly, so these words should lead us to think I'm not there. As I like that means I'm really close. It's actually, it's not the same. It's not the same actually. I and truly existent I, that's not, the meaning of those is not identical. But when I say the I doesn't exist truly, what does it mean? That the I is merely appearing, that the I, independence on body and mind, is just, if I were to look for this I, if I were to look for a solid I couldn't find it. So with regard to the I, when I say, what is the basis of imputing I? It is the aggregates. It's on the basis of the aggregates that I label I. So on the basis of the aggregates, as a basis of labeling, a basis of imputation, if I look for an I separate from that, I won't find anything. Therefore, nothing else is there, nothing separate is there. So therefore, it's based on the aggregates that I look for the I. So if I were to analyze, if I don't find a solid kind of I, then I say the I doesn't exist. I talk about selflessness. That's what it means. So here, with regard to I, there's no I. That's the same as being there's no truly existent I. So this is true with regard to the lowest philosophical systems. They talk about this self-grasping. So here, with regard to the I, what I need to eliminate is a truly existent I. So for here, it seems the I gets eliminated so that there's no I. This is how it appears to us. This is how it appears to the mind. So for someone, so it should become, we should really come to understand that in actuality, there's a difference. All things appear to us. So if there's a sense like phenomena don't exist truly, it seems like something that just comes from the mind. It seems scary. So like the mind creates this idea of true existence, creates this true existence, and then says this true existence doesn't exist. So there's this danger that we separate the object from true existence. For instance, the lower philosophical schools, starting with the Svatantrika school, they say that phenomena depend on causes and conditions. But they still they believe that phenomena exist inherently. So they believe in both, that phenomena exist inherently, and at the same time they depend. So don't say that that phenomena are totally independent. They wouldn't assert that they're self-sufficient, that they're totally independent. If we think about that, if we just refute that, if we, on one hand, this course independence, if we refute that and leave everything else, we don't get to emptiness. So when things appear to us, we should. So actually, when we refute true existence, we should also refute. We should refute the vast, the way it appears to us. So the vast, the way it appears to us, that needs to also be refuted. That needs to be negated. So the way the vast appears to us, what is this vast that appears to us? It's the truly existent vast. So therefore, when we negate true existence, we need to negate the vast as we know it. But that doesn't mean we negate vast in general, because there's still the merely labeled vast. So when we say when we negate true existence, the true existence of the vast, we also eliminate the vast. That means the vast the way it appears to us, not the merely labeled vast. Anyway, so when we say true existence of the vast, that needs to be negated. So when we say the vast is a flat-based phenomenon, a bulbous flat-faced phenomenon able to hold water. So when we look at this vast, then what is this vast exactly? We won't find anything, no essence there. So it seems like there's no vast to be found, as if there wasn't any vast at all. So this is how it seems. So since we can't find something, this is the vast. But what does that mean? We don't find the vast. This just means upon analysis, upon thorough analysis, we don't find a vast. It doesn't mean that there's no conventional vast. So if that means the vast is not there, then how does the vast exist? As being merely appearing to the mind, as being merely labeled. So that's like a magical illusion. It exists as a deceptive phenomenon. It's mere name. It's a mere imputation. It doesn't exist from its own side. It doesn't exist truly. Therefore, in short, when we say we eliminate the true existence of the vast and say that the vast doesn't exist inherently, so what do we eliminate? We need to really understand what that means. But when we don't understand what needs to be negated, when we say we have to eliminate, we have to negate the true existence of the vast, that means we don't focus on the way the vast appear to us, but think there's some other true existence. That's the problem. And that doesn't really help if we just have this true existence that's just nothing to do with the vast, and we negate that. That doesn't help us. So we need to refute, we need to negate an object of negation in such a way that it harms us that it harms the wrong perception we have with regard to the vast. So we may end up with some kind of different emptiness. So this is what it says here in verse 10 and 11, talks about not identifying the object of negation correctly, as if there was some separate kind of true existence, separate from the object. So, but such vivid duality is not found on my mother's under face, I believe, and so forth. So it doesn't really benefit us if we do that. It will actually harm us. So we may actually we may actually move away from understanding emptiness instead of getting closer to it. So with regard to the appearances, our appearances, everything appears to us as truly existent. We need to understand how we need to negate that, what we need to negate that. So we need to move closer to the actual object. So when we say eliminating true existence, or that is negating true existence, refuting no existence. So with regard to the I, for instance, if we negate it correctly, then the afflictive emotions need to be reduced. We can check, have we understood selflessness? Have we understood the object to be negated? And have we negated it properly in dependence on the I? Well, we can just check, did our afflictive emotions as a result of that, have they been reduced? Does our behavior, our conduct, does it change with regard to generating compassion, for instance, does our compassion become stronger? Does our attitude of wanting to harm others become stronger? So it all depends. We can check whether our behavior has changed. So once we have understood emptiness, then our afflictive emotions will be reduced. So if, on the other hand, if we don't understand it correctly, if our arrogance grows stronger, well, we haven't done it correctly. And if, for instance, we feel like, oh, compassion and patience, they're meaningless, it's better to do, I can do whatever I want to do, whatever I want. Well, if a person has that kind of attitude, it shows that they haven't identified the object of negation correctly, haven't negated what is to be negated in the correct way. And then he goes on to say, there's no true existence. Phenomena don't exist truly. But so in verse 12, it says, things exist, but not in this way of stark facts rendered in dichotomies. So phenomena do exist, but they don't exist in the way they appear to us. So for instance, when we take the way in which phenomena appear to us, it seems the vast exists in and of itself. So when we say positive or pleasant or unpleasant, it seems to exist from its own side. Or when we talk about an enemy seems to exist from his own side. So it seems like the enemy is always an enemy, and there's been an enemy, always has been an enemy. That which we consider to be bad, it seems like it's always been bad. So it's always bad. It's in and of itself bad. So that means we have a sense of like this seems that implies the stark facts rendered in dichotomies. That's contradictory. That's a total contradiction. So then how do phenomena exist? Well, actually, for the inseparable bond of our loving parents is more one of tenderness and joy. So here the parents, here the father is dependence, that which is dependent arising, the mother is emptiness. So the dependently risen father and then the mother. So those two, if we take those two together, if we combine those two, father and mother here, so they're inseparable. And as said before, so if we take emptiness, so emptiness helps us to understand selflessness, and selflessness helps us to understand emptiness. So therefore, those two, they're not in any kind of contradiction. Dependent arising and emptiness assist each other. So therefore, we can easily understand emptiness based on dependent arising. So those two are in harmony in that it helps us such that there seems to be no contradiction between the two. So they don't appear as contradictory, and in fact they assist each other. So when we say phenomena don't exist inherently, that helps us to understand that they exist independence. And if we understand that they exist independence on other factors, that helps us to understand that they can't exist inherently. So in that way, they assist each other. They're helping each other, those two concepts. So that these two ideas, they appear to the mind in a way that they're compatible. There's no sense, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. Instead, when we think about how phenomena really exist with those two, we get a really good sense that doesn't make us feel uncomfortable how phenomena really exist. And then, so Changkya Rölpai Dorjé here talked about the Gelugbe view. And now the next verses deal with the modes of assertion by Indian scholars, by Indian philosophers. It says Vaibhashika, Tantrika, So here Vaibhashika, Satantrika, Vishnavada. So Vishnavada are Chittamatra, and then the three Eastern Satantrika masters. So Jnanagarbha, Shantarakshita, and Kamalashita. Those are the three Eastern Satantrika masters that are mentioned in verse 13. So they label this mother, this limestone like white elephant. So they don't really understand emptiness, which is here compared to this elephant. They don't really get that. They don't have the view, they didn't find, or they don't find the view of emptiness, the ultimate view. So with regard to that, this white elephant, so they believe, for instance, they think of selflessness, they set forth selflessness. So when they talk of their own view, their own philosophical view, for instance, they say there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent self, and they're externally truly existent phenomena. So for instance, they talk about external phenomena that are based on partless particles, and based on these partless particles, these Vaibhashikas and Satantrikas, they believe all these external phenomena exist truly, and this external environment, for instance, that is the result of the culmination of the coming together of many partless particles. So therefore, so then it goes on to say, with names so divergent, external matter, a grinning tiger. And then it goes on to say, intrinsic subject or crazed monkey, and so forth. So here, a grinning tiger actually, it says actually a striped kind of a colorful kind of tiger, not just grinning, actually says in Tibetan. So here, the view of Vaibhashika Satantrika is similar to this tiger. And then it comes to verse 14 then, so intrinsic subject. So they say that there are no external phenomena. There are no external phenomena, that external phenomena, that which appears to us as external phenomena, they're just appearing to the mind. Therefore, they negate external reality that truly exists. They believe that the mind truly exists. The mind exists inherently. So the mind is the ultimate entity, but they don't believe in the existence of external phenomena. In that way, they don't believe in the true existence of external phenomena, but in the true existence of the mind. So the mind, so here it's like a monkey. It says like the Chittamatra view is described, or is compared to a crazed monkey, like our mind, like not being able to think correctly. Therefore, our mind is, there's the Chittamatra says it's like they say the mind exists truly, and that is like positing a crazed monkey. Instead of being able to recognize the elephant, they posit a crazed monkey. And then the Svatantrika, they say that, well, they believe in inherently existent non-dual nature, and so in that way they believe in a ferocious bear, in some kind of crazy bear. So they don't say that external phenomena exist truly, and they also don't say that the mind exists truly. So they do refute true existence. They do say that. However, although they say that mind and objects don't exist truly, nonetheless, they say all these phenomena exist inherently. So the object of negation of emptiness, according to the Svatantrika school, is true existence. So this true existence, that's what they refute, and they say emptiness of true existence, that's emptiness. So with regard to mind and body, they say that they don't exist truly. That mind and object, they don't exist truly. So though the mind and its objects don't exist truly, this view is not enough. So because that's like a ferocious bear, because they don't deny inherent existence. So like a dangerous kind of bear, scary bear, that's what they compare it to. So that's what that, so therefore they don't understand emptiness because they don't negate enough, which is here to say, it says yet they all seem to have lost the old mother. In that way, they don't understand emptiness. So here we have these different philosophical views. For instance, the Vaibhashika school, they do assert selflessness. So they say there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So this is asserted, this is explained, for instance, in the first turning of the wheel. The first turning of the wheel, it does mention selflessness, so that the person doesn't exist permanent as a permanent partless independent entity. So, for instance, it says that there is no self that is permanent. There's no self that is independent of mind and body, and so therefore it eliminates a certain self, a permanent, partless, independent self. And on top of that, the Vaibhashika also eliminates a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Therefore, when we say I does depend on mind and body. What does that mean? So when the I appears, then mind and body also have to appear. So without mind and body appearing, or one of the two appearing, then no way the I can appear. Therefore, the appearance of the I is dependent on mind and body. That's really what it means, that there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So without aggregates, without mind and body, an I is impossible. So only, therefore, the understanding that there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent self means really just that, understanding that you do need mind and body for the I to appear. So understanding that. So in that way, so from the Prasangika school point of view, the highest philosophical school point of view, that's just a coarse way of looking at the self. That's just a coarse selflessness, understanding this way in which the self has to exist. And we were not able to eliminate afflictive emotions by just understanding this mode of existence of the I. And then the Chittamatra school, they talk about, so actually the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika school, they describe selflessness in the way just described. So there's no permanent, partless, independent self, and there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent self. But the Chittamatra takes it further. They say that there are no external phenomena, that everything appears to our mind because of the ripening of imprints. So when the imprints in our mind ripen, then all these things appear to us. Whatever appears to us are all the different forms and so forth. So they are of one nature with the mind. They're inseparable. So in that, mind and object are of one nature. They're not separate. They appear to us to be the mind over here and the object over there, but actually they're not. They're inseparable in that they arise from the same imprint. So they're one nature. They're one entity. However, they appear separate objects, of separate entities. So this is the Chittamatra view, that they believe the mind, that the object and the mind are of one nature. They arise from the same imprint, which they describe the non-duality of subject and object in such a way that they say the lack of phenomena being separate, as in like an external phenomena existing. Well, the lack of that, that is the non-duality of subject and object. Therefore, phenomena, it seems that there is this external world, like this external pleasant objects, which, according to the Chittamatra school, but that's not the case. And actually, if we have strong attachment, strong aversion towards external objects, actually the view that there's no external world, this can actually help us. It can help us because even though that's not the deepest view of reality, still it can reduce our afflictions. It can reduce our anger attachment. It does benefit us. So it reduces our attachment. If we think along these lines, that there is no external objects, that these objects are just an appearance to the mind. Anyway, so that's the Chittamatra school. And then there's the Svatantrika school. They say that selflessness is the same selflessness as described by the other philosophical schools, the lower philosophical schools. So there's no permanent, partless, independent self, and there's no self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So the subtlest selflessness, according to the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, the Chittamatra, and the Svatantrika, is the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. However, they also describe the selfnesses of phenomena. The selfness of phenomena, for instance, the vase, for instance, the vase exists in and of itself, but it doesn't exist truly. So it's through, so on one hand, so this Svatantrika would say that the object exists in and of itself, but also in dependence on the mind. So that a vase, for instance, you have both aspects. The vase exists in and of itself, but it only exists nonetheless because there's a mind to which it appears. But this is how they describe the existence of the vase, for instance, the Svatantrika. So if the vase really existed, so actually the reasoning is that if the vase existed truly, then you wouldn't have to call the vase a vase. So for someone who doesn't know it's a vase, they would also be able to know, oh, this is a vase. But on the other hand, the vase has to, so if the vase existed truly, one would know this naturally. But on the other hand, the vase has to exist inherently. Why? Because otherwise, if the vase didn't exist inherently, well, there could also be a pillar. So there would be no difference between a vase and a pillar and so forth. They would all be the same. So it needs to have both aspects. It's important that although the vase doesn't exist truly, it exists in dependence of the appearance to the mind, it still exists in and of itself. So it's important to understand. And here it's the example that is given by the Svatantra school that's very important is the magical kind of it's a magical kind of apparition. So for instance, the example that is given, if you have a magician who's got a piece of wood and a pebble, so based on that pebble and the horse, so based on those, and then the magician, he also kind of gives a spell. Due to the spell from the magician, some kind of something that is applied to the eyes, so some kind of magical spell. Based on that, this pebble and this wood, they appear like a horse and an elephant. So it's on one hand, you have the elephant, you have the basis, which is the wood and the pebble. So that means like phenomena exist inherently, but at the same time, you also need the magician's spell. And so based on that, this pebble and this spell appears like an elephant and a horse. So similarly, so here, therefore, unless you had the pebble and the wood, then unless you had those, you couldn't have the appearance of elephant and horse. So this means that therefore phenomena have to exist in and of themselves. They have to exist inherently, but at the same time, you also need the spell of the magician. So in that sense, you have both aspects, and it's not that difficult. So based on this example, Rinpoche says you can understand that according to the Svatantrika system, phenomena exist inherently, but at the same time, they're dependent on the mind. However, this view is not subtle enough. So this is still does not present the subtlest view of the Prasangika school. So this view of the Svatantrika is really just posited through philosophy. It's just a philosophical view. This does not apply. This is not really equal with reality. It doesn't describe reality. It just describes a philosophical view that the Svatantrika holds. Therefore, those are not all these philosophers do not describe the subtlest view. So the Vaibhashika, the Satantrika, the Chittamatra, and the Svatantrika do not describe the subtlest view of reality. And then it goes on to say, for instance, in the Abhidhamma Kosha, so with regard to the different philosophical systems, they're all taught by the Buddha. But the Buddha himself, he set forth reality in many different ways. So Changkya Rölpai Dorjé himself, so his view here, and this is so the view of Changkya Rölpai Dorjé himself. She reads the commentary. So of the four philosophical schools, so Vaibhashika, and so forth. So they have eliminated, they have not so for instance, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé says that these 4 philosophical schools that they were set forth, that they missed the point. So it goes on to say then, with regard to verse 15, it goes on to say that here you have these different scholars and meditators like Sakya, Nyingma, Kama, and Drupa. So what does it mean in verse 15 here? You have scholars and meditators. What does that mean? This word Kitup in Tibetan is one word actually. So on one hand, there are meditators they're called scholar meditators really, because meditators means they've meditated on the meaning of the Dharma. So someone who is actually who's attained the path of accumulation or preparation, or the path of seeing. So when we say meditators here, in that sense here, they're like accomplished masters. So they've attained certain levels. So Trutop is the Tibetan word, which is kind of like an accomplished meditator. So here we talk about different attainments, different cities, so the common and the uncommon cities. Usually the word, it's in Tibetan, it says here in the translation meditators, but really an accomplished person. And then scholars, so the Tibetan word Kitup is put together of these 2 syllables. One is accomplished and the other is scholar. So many scholars and meditators are accomplished masters. So they pride themselves on their diverse terminology. So reflexive awareness, subject-free, empty, and luminous, it says here. And so being clear, luminous, and empty at the same time. So this kind of being free from apprehending something, this reflexive awareness. This is how they describe emptiness here in the Sakya tradition. According to so this is just Changkya Rölpai Dorjé's view, which she said previously. That's his view. So now Rinpoche looks up this terminology from the Sakya tradition, in particular, reflexive awareness, subject-free, empty, and luminous. And then also primordial purity and spontaneity, Samantabhadra's true face. So here, what does that mean? That's according to the Nyingma tradition. So based on the great Indian masters. So they received these teachings from the Indian masters and then Bema Sambhava. So anyway, which is now explaining, well, first, the Sakya views that of reflexive awareness, etc., the Nyingma views that of primordial purity and spontaneity, Samantabhadра's true face. And then there's Maham. So here, this refers to Dzogchen. In short, so when we hear, so we say that the middle way, the final middle way, the ultimate middle way view is Dzogchen. So being appearing and being spontaneous and pure and so forth. So they're although they're empty, they're clear, and although they're clear, they're empty. Because so in a sense there's no grasping, there's no holding, because from within this, the clarity, phenomena appear as empty. So with here, this is really not easy. This is difficult. So it's easy to explain just those words, but the actual meaning here, it's very difficult, first of all, to understand this text here, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé's text, in the sense that first you need to understand the philosophical schools. And so unless you have some understanding of what this is talking about here, the Nyingma and the Sakya and so forth, it's very difficult to really understand the deepest meaning. So it becomes obvious here with regard to these words here, what does it really mean? So first to gain some understanding of Kundansan. So first we need to understand really this text here properly, we need to Kundansan's explanation. So here it says, here now Rinpoche gives a quote. What does it mean? So here with regard to this text, like recognizing the mother. So Kundang Dömbe Dröme. So he, this great Indian Tibetan master, he also explains this similarly here. So he explains what the different traditions describe, and then so it's like in a form of a comparison. So really what Changkya Rölpai Dorjé is asking here, does this really describe the final view? He's just kind of raising this kind of doubt, as in like not saying they don't understand the final view, but he's just challenging basically, does this really refer to the final view? So still saying, of course, they're necessary, these explanations, but he's just comparing them. So of course, best is we study all this in their details. So to understand, well, the whole, these different traditions, if you study them extensively, in particular with regard to the view, but it's difficult to compare them here now, right now, because not knowing exactly what they refer to. But the point is here with regard to these explanations given here. So here, subject free, for instance, as it says in the Sakya tradition. So having not apprehending anything. And then also describes here, you have words such as Samantabhadra's true face, primordial purity, and spontaneity. So there's this explanation that's given in these texts. So we need to understand what they really refer to. So with regard to Dzogchen, for instance, talking of the non-duality of the union. So not being inexpressible, not being able to apprehend anything that's inapprehensible, and so forth. So those are the explanations usually given in the text. Anyway, so these words, they come up in the text. And then in the Kagya tradition, you have Mahamudra, the uncontrived innate nature. So with regard to the clear light mind, this clear light mind that is uncontrived, that is spontaneous, innate. So that's described as Mahamudra, that pure mind. So that is natural, that is innate, that is uncontrived. So that's described as the final view. So when explaining this, so without, it's a natural state with regard to the mind. It's a natural state without being contrived in any way. So this is what these words mean here when it says Mahamudra, the uncontrived innate nature. So described in verse 15. So here with regard to the mind, so usually with regard to the different disturbances of the mind, been not present. So all of those have been, so they've been all removed. So it's just that clarity of the mind. So we're not thinking of the past, not thinking of the future, but it's just the appearance of empty, of the emptiness, just that is appearing to the mind, just that empty state. So no appearances of forms and so forth. So there's no sense, I should meditate on this, I should meditate on that. It's just this natural state of the mind. You just allow the mind to be in that natural state. That's what's described here. So being in that natural, innate kind of nature. So within that, allow the mind to rest. So without any object really appearing, it's just that the mind just being empty. And that's what it means to meditate on the final view. This is the explanation you find in the Kagyu tradition. So verse 15 and 16. Therefore, there's the Sakya tradition. So when they talk about reflexive awareness and so forth, and then likewise the Mahamudra tradition of the Kagyu or Dzogchen in the Nyingma tradition, so they all have different views that they present in the end. So it's described differently. So different quotes and so forth are given different explanations. So explanations are all differ. They're not the same. The way it's explained, the way it's presented, it is presented differently, and different reasonings are presented to present these different views. But so how actually what they're pointing at is the final view. So what is this final view we're trying to meditate on? So that needs to be presented by all these different words, by all these different terms. So it's important to say, this is the final view. This is what we need. So when saying that, so when we talk about reflexive awareness, empty and luminous, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, if they're all the same, if they all refer to emptiness, so this should be the basis of all phenomena. So without difference, without any difference, so something that applies to all phenomena. Anyway, so this is what the words should be referring to. And this is what these words also refer to, so being free from subject, without, so this is all expressed by these words, this spontaneity, purity, and so forth. So there's nothing to recognize and so forth. And based on these words, what we should, the meaning that we should get from that should apply to emptiness. So the mind being totally pure, the mind being relaxed and in this uncontrived kind of state without distinguishing between this, that, and the other. So without apprehending anything, just that clarity, that's what should appear to the mind. So as in like very clear, the mind should just appear so that nothing appears to the mind. So just that nothingness appears to the mind. I mean, that it could be understood in that way, that there's nothing appearing to the mind. That's not, if it leads to that extreme, then that's not correct. So so of course it leads us to the final view if the meaning of these words are understood correctly. But if it's misunderstood, so there's a danger Changkya Rölpai Dorjé is just pointing out, of course, if there's actual Mahamudra or actual Dzogchen, it points at the actual emptiness, but there's the danger if it's misunderstood by someone who's not fully qualified, then it could lead to the extreme that there's nothing there. So this is what Changkya is saying here. So Kongda-san is also talking about it. Changkya is also talking about this here. It's important. He also previously talked about if we don't identify the object of negation properly, there's this danger we will move away from emptiness. So if we just stick with the words, that's one problem. He points out the different problems. And then likewise, if we follow other systems such as Dzogchen and Mahamudra, where it's explained differently, if again we misunderstand it, we may again miss the point. We will not be able to find the ultimate view. So we end up just not of holding anything, of just holding on to nothingness. So that's the danger if there's misunderstanding the view. Therefore, we need to overcome that kind of problem that we end up just having no apprehension whatsoever, not apprehending anything. We're not the mind, nothing appears to the mind. That's not the goal. That's not what it means with regard to emptiness. So that the mind just is totally empty. To believe that this is emptiness, there's nothingness. That this is so there's this danger that you misunderstand Mahamudra, that you misunderstand Dzogchen, the reflexive awareness as described in the Sakya tradition. So for instance, when we talk about form, the first moment of the form, when does the form really exist? Actually, the first moment is gone. Then the second moment, the form is there. But then if you take that one moment during which the present moment during which the form exists, well, the first, you can just subdivide it again into two moments. And so the first moment is already gone. The second moment hasn't arisen yet. So if you start analyzing, you don't find anything. You don't find anything. And again, so there's nothing you can point at. If you have an object, for instance, a snake, for instance, what is the snake? Is it the upper? Is it the lower? Is it the front part? Is it the latter part? Like, which part is the actual snake? It's not the part of the front. It's not the part in the back. So what is the snake? So you can end up thinking there's nothing there. That extreme may arise. So to fall into extreme, and Changkya Rölpai Dorjé is really warning of this here. It says also in the Lamrim Chimo, in the Great Lamrim, so vase and so forth appear. So whether you talk of vase or pillars, so this vase, so it's opening the bulbous area. So for instance, is the vase the mouth of the vase? Is it the bulbous kind of part? That's also not the vase. Is it its space? That's also not the vase. So if you analyze all the different parts of the vase, you can't find anything that is the vase. There's no essence. If you can't posit a vase, so if none of its parts are the vase itself, so none of these aspects are not the vase. So in the end, it seems there's nothing. There's no vase. So vase doesn't exist. That extreme, you may fall into this extreme of nihilism. So some people feel that the non-existence of vase, that's the emptiness of the vase. So there's this danger, and this is what Changkya Dorjé is really warning of here. So when we take all the different parts of the vase, that's not the vase. So if we say just the non-findability of the vase, that's the emptiness of the vase. Well, that's easy actually. To not be able to find the vase, that's not difficult. That's easy. It says in Lama Tsongkhapa's Great Lamrim. So also Lama Tsongkhapa talks about this in other texts. in Sumto Buddha, it's like a kind of collection of words of Lama Tsongkhapa. So there's some words where Lama Tsongkhapa just gives some advice. There it also talks about this. So in some notes, basically, Lama Tsongkhapa talks about the same thing. So with regard to physical objects, they have spatial parts. And then when you have the mind can be divided not into spatial parts, but it can be divided into former moments and later moments. So with regard to these different parts, nothing can be found. So for instance, when you have a whole, it's dependent on parts. For instance, take a hand, for instance, with 5 fingers. So for a hand, a complete hand, you need 5 fingers. So if you have only 4 fingers, you don't have this complete hand. So again, the whole and a part, it's dependent on, they are dependent on each other. So if you have this 5-fingered hand, so this is a whole, it's whole. So if you take away 1 finger, it's no longer this 5-fingered hand. It's no longer this whole hand. And so it's dependent, this 5-fingered hand is dependent on all these fingers, but it's none of those parts is the 5-fingered hand. And if you don't find this hand, that is, if that means emptiness, that's too empty, just not that finding. So just this idea of not finding the hand, that is emptiness, that's not enough. Then anyone can understand emptiness. It's not difficult, Lama Tsongkhapa says. This is in itself not sufficient. So here Lama Tsongkhapa says it very clearly. So with regard to understanding that none of the parts are the object itself, that this non-definability, that's not emptiness yet. That's not enough. That doesn't mean you've realized emptiness. That's not sufficient. So this is what it says in the Great Lamrim. So what I wanted to say here, with regard to understanding the view, really understanding the final view, so whether we analyze emptiness or not. So this is described very extensively in Lama Tsongkhapa's text. So existing from its own side, so phenomena existing in that way, that is really existing from its own side. That we need to understand, that this is the object of negation. So understanding what is the object that is labeled, if the phenomenon existed in and of itself, so it should be able to find it on the side of the object. I should be able to find this is the object. And so we need to find this, like a sense of what am I looking for, and then engaging in the analysis. And so here with regard to this text, recognizing my mother. So anyway, verse 15, here it describes verse 2, 3, and 4 describes the different traditions. And then it says in verse 16, the uncontrived innate nature neither is nor is not, devoid of any standpoint. This is all splendid, and so forth. So Batsa he translated the entry into the middle way, and some of his followers, they also talked about this view of like neither is nor is not, and so forth. So devoid of any standpoint, this is all splendid if the target is hit, but I wonder what you're all pointing at. So of course, if that was the final view, that's great. So it points at emptiness, but if it really points at that, that's great, but is it really understood correctly? So if that's what is the actual, like which words describe the actual emptiness? I'm wondering, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé says. So whether it is the Mahamudra view, the Dzogchen view, the Sakya view, the Gelugpa view, so all these different ways in which the word describe emptiness. So do they really point at emptiness, and that can we really understand emptiness? So it's important to really go beyond the words and understand so that phenomena don't exist in and of themselves. So we're not saying that the mind shouldn't perceive nothing. I mean, that doesn't mean that the mind should just perceive nothingness. That is not emptiness. That's definitely so. We need to become aware that we don't fall into an extreme. So Kongden Rinpoche, he also talks about this. So it doesn't matter how the different views are explained. There is definitely this explanation of not holding on to anything. But if that means the mind doesn't take any object, well, that would be an extreme. That would mean not gaining the right view. Anyway, so if we read this together, like Changkya Rölpai Dorjé's text, and then also Kongden Rinpoche's text together, then that will become a little bit easier and a bit easier to understand the meaning if you use the commentaries together. And then he goes on to say, so anyway, it's important to understand emptiness completely. So anyway, so he goes on to say in verse 17, external matter is not dismantled. Vaibhashika and Satantrika, worry not and be pleased. So here Changkya Rölpai Dorjé says, well, the external phenomena do exist. So if external phenomena don't exist, then you can't posit anything. So it's difficult. So we can't posit shape, color, and so forth. Therefore, phenomena have to exist externally. There have to be external phenomena, because otherwise cause and effect are difficult to explain and so forth. Therefore, you don't have to worry, he says, the Vaibhashika and Satantrika, who do posit external phenomena. So external phenomena do exist. However, with regard to the formless particles, that's not something we accept. So we do accept external phenomena. So the Prasangika school says, yes, there are external phenomena, but there is no partless particles. So that is not asserted. So some aspects of the Vaibhashika and Satantrika school, the Prasangika does accept, and that's what is presented here. So you don't need to worry. The external matter is not refuted, it says. And then it goes on in verse 17. So though no reflexivity, cognition and cognized are tenable. So no, sorry, there's no reflexivity, but cognition and cognized are there. So what does the Chittamatra school say? They say that there's no external phenomena and that the mind truly exists. So that there's really a mind. So the mind exists inherently and so forth. So that the mind exists as just knowing, as just being luminous and knowing. And they also have the view that the mind perceives itself, is aware of itself. So this is refuted. So they say that, therefore, based on the understanding that, well, there's reflexivity, there's a reflexive consciousness or self-knowing consciousness, therefore phenomena exist truly. That's the view of the Chittamatra school. So you need to know, the mind needs to know itself, otherwise the mind is not established, the mind is not posited, it cannot be posited according to the Chittamatra school. So you don't need anything else, you don't need another mind to posit the existence of the mind, because the mind knows itself. That's the view they hold. So otherwise the mind couldn't be truly existent if there wasn't another mind, if there wasn't a mind that perceived it, and that's the self-knowing mind. So we say that external phenomena exist, so they don't accept external phenomena, but shapes and colors and so forth, they exist because there's a mind to perceive them. So for something to exist, to be really existent, the Chittamatra school says you need a mind, and unless the mind knows itself, there's nothing that posits the mind. However, Prasangika doesn't accept that. Therefore, the Chittamatra school, what they accept is that there's no external phenomena, that phenomena are only in the nature of the mind. that they're not separate from the mind, and that all you need is the mind, that you don't need anything, that the one thing that's really there is just the mind. And Changkya Rölpai Dorjé says, although phenomena do not exist truly, but there's still mind and its object. So even though there's no reflexive awareness or self-knowing awareness, that doesn't mean mind and object don't exist. So basically, Changkya Rölpai Dorjé is saying to the Chittamatra school, well, we still accept mind and its object. And then with regard to the Svatantrika school, well, Svatantrika school, as explained before, so they say phenomena don't exist don't exist truly, but they exist inherently. So there's this view that if you were to analyze an object, for instance, a self, for instance, the eye, if you were to analyze the eye, there's something that you find, there's something inherent, some inherent eye that you can be found. And what is it that you find is the mental consciousness. That's the Svatantrika view. The mental consciousness is the actual eye, the inherent eye. Therefore, if you thoroughly analyze what is the eye, what is the self, you will find something. That's what they say. So something based on the basis of imputation, you do find something, because if on the basis of imputation, you don't find anything, the Svatantrika school would say, if you don't find anything, the I can't exist. However, in the Prasangika school, they would say, well, even if you don't find anything, Prasangika school would say to the Svatantrika school, you still find something, you do find something. If you don't find something, the self still exists. So even though when you analyze the mind and body and try to find the I, even if you don't find something in that moment, it doesn't mean the I doesn't exist. So therefore, it says, that's what it says in 17. So you don't need to worry, basically. Your 3 Eastern Masters, be pleased as well. So dependent arising remains stark. Anyway, so Rinpoche says this should be enough for today. We got to verse 17 and we still have some time for question and answers. So we can now start with question and answer.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche, for these precious teachings. Emilia will be first. Emilia, could you please unmute?
Emilia?
Thank you. I have 2 questions for Rinpoche. One was from last week, that when one realizes emptiness at the subtlest level, what does happen to the mere appearances of phenomena? Do they cease to be displayed?
Mm-hmm.
That's one question. And then the other one is from today, when Rinpoche mentioned that non-findability is not enough to realize emptiness. Then how to realize emptiness?
Merci. Mo condition ni Rinpoche. Tiri chikdi khasan the nangamala Rinpoche chik soya denan dene chela condition shir. Condition di karisna Tony law. Ale Rinpoche is not hearing.
Banuji, please, we need to go on the main channel, all of us.
Rinpoche kudo
하고도
now Rinpoche can hear.
This should be better.
Okay, thank you, Manu. Rinpoche 토지나 the 손주나이라 토지나 백편도 중서 아니 단다 고 컨디션 디디레 가상강마 Rinpoche 두두징이라 Rinpoche 다다 돈이 도즈기 콜라송라 다 돈이 남도아 되잖아 아니 나와 참된소 롤라 능가 말해 다 돈이 남도아 되잖아 다 라시기 두동와 남도아 되잖아 아니 지 칼로단 남유 먼저 칼내야기 추든소 능가 말해 디kopsu 지 투어지 디리라 아니 투어니바디 디린단 대화체 다 당기 Rinpoche 소에나신 다 유다던 세는 마녀바디 돈이 도즈 마촌나다 카르 디 레라고 이나다 제롬시 소에나신 디 레라고 참레 디 대삼 돈이 두고 말해 다 딜을 하고 카르토고 마녀바다 랑기 차시라 딜을 딱 주시 마녀바 데 돈이 마이나 디 돈이 또 먹거나 딜을 하고 카르토고
저 나무디디레 지단 돈이 투머토베 카도딜라 리베지스 빠네 돈이 도야마도 요마레 무슨도 또 도야메레 지단지 다 돈이 투머토베 거라 돈이 또 신베 거라 쓰기요베나 돈이 또 신베 거라 센디 유통바니라 su deva dang toni la ne deva indi gang la toni nawa zang yore toni gi nawa zang da toni ji dunji dang dinde gi nawa da yore ma do be dile shin be dande gi nga tu min la na de gi chada ma cha gonzu gi nawa di je je di da yo ma re mun ju du yo ma re ji re
Yes.
da dine toni do ne ku toni do ya gi lu di yang nga su danda nga ji kan된 지와 나신리 추수지 kan된 지와 있는데 까만 카제 지와 있는 kan된 제 차야기 뒤주죠. 제 차네 양 아주 난주 나신 받선주 내가 지로 어디 나신 돈이라 센수지 돈이 도고 야 고문딜에 야 랑지지네 난주 나신 주대리 난주의 지버레스. 다 돈이 운송도 도신베 거라. 돈이 운송도 도 용디가 돈이 도야 돼 공공공공공지 나시기지. 돈번이 운송도 통용디가라. 다 돈이 운송도 시베 시몰라. 공주비 나오 타다 노지시네 돈이가 니나 모바시 다 유동번이 가자 까장지 동상 디가랑라 신수대지 디랑라 신크란 딜바 팅괴지마도 취티버 취了 팀만나신 취了 취샤 팅괴지마도 나오신다 간요 말이스 야 딘제기 냥샤 딜이야 뒤쪽에 체여 디가라 나와 가시에 공원에 루카시에 공원에 냥샤 딜이야 야 라네 지도 라용디가라 원시 디소무도 주용 그래 아니 주적이 취지제제디 통용그레스 디고 지제 다 저디 거이나 다양 저회된다 신다지는 아주 제도学习 다 저니바
That's it.
저니바 디디리 지단짐 송에디 하동침이 나로로 요래 넘버 2 투나지 나다 근데 차진 본바디 있어 차진 본바디 카시기 따지 제당디 지바 제당디 변 센세디랑 신지 마두거리스 라요다 라신지 마두버 간데제 신지셰 자우슈스는 니가는 지셰 마 자우용디가라 간데 자고르스는 센스에티라 카도미투스 센란도 스타용디가다 센라 미네 공자용디가 센라 카도요 마로 센 용장게 다니자 카도 디단 디레스지네 텐도메바 아니 센라 수다 지 주송된 동부리 수단 디네 도스지네 이수마주바 도도메바 이수마주바 다나신기 센라지 수단 카도다 딘데 강에 매버 장도 마시베 강도 수진기 추기 나주 다 쇼기차 이로 샤쇼기차 노쇼 쇼기차 양시에요 말 센라 샤쇼 노쇼 수메디 딘데 강에 시에 매버 인디가나 다 강도 양 문소민도 스타기라나시 카도 문소야민도 이문소야민도 아니 다나신기 가르사 디로 쇼 문소야민도 마세베 센디 데베 센디야 데베 센디 가차바레 몬베 센디 지주레 단다기 센디 가바레스 디레스 두고 나올라 디레스 지네 주주사 가야민도 시지네 간도야 문소 매바 디짱의 동번이 시대에 수지 디네 용디고로 디짱의 동니 시에바 있는 동니디 할레베 디차기도 스거다 레라우치 차기도 나나신 차진기 분버스라오니 분버스 에디고 지나 추도 유딩이 또 유딩이 아니 샤오 유딩이 딘데지라 분버스기로 와다 분버스는 딘데라고 지로 다 차셰 디주 참무 추바 지라 분버스가 주시디요 다 차셰기 나모라 또디 분버레베스 마로 또장 또기 차셰지 다 추도디 분버레베스 추도장의 분버스라고 마로 마레스기로 아니 샤오디 분버레베스는 마레스기로 분버기 샤오디 분베 샤오리 마도 분버 마레스기로 다 딘데스 한다는데 오다 분베 나로기 분배 난기 무익이 차 동부지 수키 용지지니 디 칸에 술러지지니 디 분배레베 지수나 대양 분배 말했어. 다 딘데 인장 오다 차셰 간제지 술 추진도 숨지지니 분배레베 지디가라 제스라에 지양민도 주체 디장의 때네 오다 분배스니 니도 매버레샤 랑신 매버레샤 오다 딜라 따워스러고도 시지 러베나 디 렐하슈지레샤스 다디 마레스 다 딘제기 다된 세상이 마레스 다오늘 다된 추세디 가르스나 지단 추나 유중문의 주바 가요 마레스 유중문의 주바디 가자로 가자 유중문의 주바 유중문의 주바디 가자 임바 시베 토네 다 유중문의 주나 가봐 요 그랬으나 유지된도 드시 자요 거다 다시 문의 주나 다시 강라 고 드시 자투바지다 다시기 문의 고 된주여버지다 다시기 문의 나做了出了세부 차주 여버지 고래 리진 청와 나로 송바 나신 di bidireda minju gedi chuina niwa naji jimi tons da minju sna ngazu tarin bu shimala tadigala jamsu chi shimala tadigala shimangala yöndaw ji jagro yu chin daw ji gre dila minju sigre da di ku chundaw ji tongre shimala tadigala shimas나 고로
치마스는 치마제 제당은 치마세더라.
영수기 치가 심하면 뭐여봐. 심할 인지기 지스르려면.
양주기 참 치마. 점심 치마 되게 많다.
아자라다 가리디.
그러면
Chema,
참
and
참. 아, 센트로 제당이 첸디라. 치마 저 센트.
센트. 디 망보여디 타리.
뭐지 계속 돌아 지지. 센트.
유엔다. 이 춘다고 지어리. 추기.
러스.
민주디 계시 추임바이나.
러스.
추임바이나 타리문이 춘다고 지 통그레. 디 추임바이나. 그다 아 니르 두디가라 고 추임바디
시르도.
때도고.
러스.
디 인상스고. 비디나. 예시 위중문에 톤스고. 유쿠랑기 문에 출 주요바이나 추 간데 진들이 쿠랑기 문에 출 주요바이나. 아니 쿠랑기 강라. 쿠랑기 강라 판도스 따간도 디강라. 쿠랑세 쿠세다 추세다 디다 이세디 쿠랑 강라 요바이나 쿠랑기 강라 만도스 타 지니 타 니도 다지 지간도 디강라 쿠세디 세두 두고 그랬어. 아 봄바세디 봄베 다시 강라 다시 문에 출 주요바이나 다시 강라. 봄바스니리 가르레스. 차셰 리워레베스 말이. 차셰 타다 초바디레베스 말이. 나오나 가르레스. 다 쿠랑기 무인에 출 디레스에기 지앙민도. 디 인상 쿠랑기 무인에 초바 두텐상의 민도 시지네. 타 딘도 마주바디 따로 꾸이네. 주텐라 꾸이네. 아니 rangi muine mindu rangi muine maduba ti toni re madu cha iri kumare se ti tang toni re se mare
That's this is. So in order to answer your question, so the first question is, well, when you realize emptiness, your first question being, well, does the object itself, is there still an appearance of anything when you realize emptiness, right? So Rinpoche said, well, when we first come to realize emptiness upon analyzing an object, well, the first time when we realize it, it'll be a conceptual understanding of emptiness. It won't be, for the first time when you realize emptiness, you won't realize it directly, which means that, well, on one hand, when you realize it conceptually, of course, emptiness will appear. But on top of that, there will also be the appearance of the generic image of emptiness. That will also appear, which is not emptiness itself. But besides that, all sorts of conventional truth won't appear. So it will only be, well, the generic image of emptiness and emptiness itself that will appear to you. And then, of course, you remain with this for some time. And of course, you arise from this type of meditation. So for instance, when you do prayers, when she gave the example of prayers, you may do your prayers for an hour or for a few minutes. And at some point, you arise from that. And so similarly, in that, when you're with this mind, at that point, only emptiness and the generic image of emptiness will appear, and that's it. And then, of course, when you arise from this mind, then you will perceive all sorts of other things as well, again, conventional truth. So with this mind, you won't perceive anything else. Then through habituation, your mind that previously realized emptiness conceptually will then transform into a mind that realizes emptiness directly. When you directly realize emptiness, all that appears to the mind is emptiness. Nothing else will appear to it. No conventional truth. It is a non-dual mind in that any other appearance other than emptiness will totally disappear. And so it is said that the appearance of emptiness, so the mind of emptiness and emptiness itself, it seems that the mind is absorbed in emptiness. So the analogy that's given is that as if water is poured into water. When you pour water into water, you can't separate which water did you pour into which. So likewise here, with regard to the mind realizing emptiness directly, it is like they're merging, they're becoming one. That is the sense to that mind. And so there's no appearance, anything other than emptiness. But when you rise from that, when you rise from this meditative absorption, of course, all sorts of appearances arise again. So that is an answer to your first question. No conventional truth appear while the mind is there. However, when you rise from it, appearances will continue to appear. I mean, these different objects will appear. Now to your second question. Now, what it says, for instance, you should read this in the special insight part of the great Lamrim by Lama Tsongkhapa, or the treatise, as it's also called, the treatise of the graduated stages to the path of enlightenment, in Tibetan, the great Lamrim. And there's one section that's called the special insight section. And in that section, it is explained that when you look for the vase, for instance, Rinpoche gives the example of the vase. So when you look for the vase among its parts and you don't find it, that is not enough. That is not enough. So whether you take a physical object, it's made of parts, physical parts, or you take the mind. When we say the mind, a physical object doesn't exist inherently. It doesn't exist truly. What does that actually mean? Let's take the mind. So, well, a coarse way to look at it, for instance, the mind is not a color. The mind has no color. Well, it's just an experiencing entity. The mind is just an experiencing entity, so it has no color. The mind has no shape. It doesn't come along with a shape such as squared and so forth, because again, it's just a perceiving or an experiencing entity. Likewise, it has no spatial directions, like an upper part, a lower part, none of those. So basically, you can say the mind is neither this, that, or the other. It's not color, it's not shape, it's not a directional part where it has neither of these parts. And then when you think of when you come to understand that, well, then take, for instance, the parts in time. The mind does occupy time. Time as in, like, there's the mind yesterday, there's the mind tomorrow, there's the mind today. But where is the mind found within yesterday's mind? You won't find a mind. I mean, yesterday's mind is gone. Tomorrow's mind hasn't arisen yet. When if you take the present mind to find exact the present moment, we won't be able to find it. And during this teaching, Rinpoche talked about this briefly. So you won't find a present moment. So you don't find, this is not the mind, this is not the mind. Well, that is not enough. That's easy, right? This is not the mind, this is not the mind, that's not the mind. Just to exclude, this is not the mind. So taking the example, going back to the example of the vase, Rinpoche said, well, if a vase, it's got a mouth, it's got a bulbous kind of entity, like a belly, like a round bellied area, and it's got a flat base, right? So is the mouth the vase? No, it's not. Is that round belly, is that the vase? No, it's not. It's the flat base the vase? No, it's not. The inner particles, the inner area of the vase, its particles, is that the vase? No, it's not. So just not being able to point it, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this, not kind of excluding all that non-findability, Lama Tsongkhapa says it's easy. There's more to it. That's not yet in emptiness in that sense. So what else do you need to do? Well, there is a sense that there is an existence from the side of the object. There's a sense from the side of the object, there is a vase. There's something in and of itself that makes it a vase. If that really existed, the vase should appear clearer and clearer to the mind. So Rinpoche gave the example of sand. You know, we had this discussion. So shore, if you look at the shore of a sea, for instance, of the sea, so there's sand there. And if you look from afar, with the sunlight, you know, to do with the time of the day, the sand may shimmer in such a way as if it was water. Right? We misperceive the sand to be water. If it was actual water, the closer we got to the sand, the clearer the water would have to appear. But of course, that's not the case. So likewise, if there's a sense, there's something from the side of the object, there's a vase existing from the side of the parts of the vase. The closer we look, the clearer this would have to appear, and that doesn't happen. So basically, you look closer and closer from the point of view of the basis of imputation of the parts of the vase. You check, is it one with its part? Is it separate from its parts? You know, you have the 7 extremes as they're laid out by Chandrakirti, for instance. So you exclude all those and find there is nothing from the side of the object, not just excluding all the parts, but coming to understand nothing from the side of the objects suggests the existence of a vase. In fact, the vase is disappearing because from the side of all these parts, there's nothing there that we can point at saying that's the vase. So it's not just the non-findability as described earlier, there's more to it. You have to go deeper in the way Rinpoche just described. So that's the difference. Okay.
Next will be, thank you so much, Rinpoche. Thank you so much, Emilia and Geshe-la. Next will be B. B, could you please unmute?
Hi. I have 2 questions, one from previous teaching and one is a follow-up from teaching today. So in trying to understand more how Prasangika established conventional assistance, so they say that the conventional person is established upon the 5 aggregates, and they say this conventional person is a non-associated compositional factor. And say, for example, if I impute water onto water, so that imputed water, like the imputed person, is that also non-associated compositional factor? Or is that a name concept? Or is that matter, form source?
Sorry, allow me to check with you. So are you saying when you label a person on the basis of the 5 aggregates, that person is a non-associated compositional factor? But your question is, what about imputing water onto water, right?
Yes,
is that
I'm just
also
drawing a parallel.
Parallel, yes. So is your question, is water therefore also a non-associated compositional factor because you just merely label water on the basis of hydrogen and oxygen? Are you saying that?
Yes, I'm asking that imputed water, is that non-associated compositional factor? Is that name and concept? Or is that matter, form source?
Okay. Is it because it's merely labeled? Is that a name? Is that merely a name and a concept?
Yes, because because Prasangika oftentimes say conventional assistant is merely imputed upon name and
merely
and thought.
Okay. Mere name. It's mere name, they say sometimes, right?
Yes. So then how, then how do we distinguish between imputation and, thoughts?
The object itself. Okay.
So that's
one question.
Do you want to do this first and then I do the second one?
Yeah, go ahead. Do the second.
The second one, Rinpoche say that in order to abandon the cognitive obscuration, we need bodhicitta. Yet in our practice, we are told that wisdom and method and bodhicitta are 2 separate practices because they have 2 different objects. We need to practice them, at least in sutra. So then why is it that bodhicitta is needed to abandon cognitive obscuration?
Okay. All right.
And on the path of seeing in meditation, or maybe even starting from the path of accumulation and preparation, the purpose is to try to realize emptiness directly. So during that time, but emptiness doesn't just exist floating in the air. It is always emptiness of something. So what is the conventional phenomena from which they start when they try to get into the direct meditative equipoise of emptiness, which then is the antidote to abandon our afflictions?
That's 3 questions, right?
I suppose so. They sort of kind of all roll into one in my head.
Okay, right, no problem. Just to make sure I don't lose one of the questions. Sure. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Kanji share tikte kasan dundanga madante ne kuna kanji share. Tanda thank you bulula karasung varasna pumbo ngabula tene takwe kyude pumbo ngabula tene takwe ta pumbo ngabu karona tene takwe kansa de temen duje yi ta chugi chashela dene dakbe chujora, the chugi chashela dene dakbe chu dian demen dujirve. Ani kutua di diri da ko karisam gudusna da 공부하고 가르나 되는 다고 기우디 아니 기우스나 강사디 아 내면 주지 가신들으스나 다고 민samre 단예samre 다이나 고 민sam 단예sam이나 다양 추대양 민sam 단예sam인 거라 아니 추디 추 말해 추디 수진기 추 말해 그래서 고 민samre 단예sam라 어디인자 다단다 고 삼단다 디딘자레 다단다 강사디 부모가불라 되는 다고 기우 인자 다고 숙점 그 수마레스 그 되면 주제래 언니도 추다면서 더더 인자래 뒤투어 당부들이 이러면서 뒤 랭크인데 야나게 투어 샴바데서 표가
근데 또 뒤우리시
나세 근데 투어 니바나서 근데 투어 샴바디 가스나 오래 다단다 디린단데네 컨디션이 디리르면서 가서 말스나 난조 시티 방향이 제도 돈이 더 배치를 잠도 마세 장주세명 공고레스 디 가르치는 공고를 하버도 단다 돌로라이나 아니 탑단시라니 손드되는 냠존내야 매장 아니 가르치는 영 돈이 장주세명 공고레 아니 주어숨디 돈이 무슨도 도와야게 제도 다 돈이 무슨 다 당부 돈이 던지도 그래서라 다이나 소소 뮤조디 졸람라서 디가서 뮤즈고 가르스나 다르던서 안토니 무슨도 또야 디치도 아니 소소 냠슬랭그라 냠리쳐고 대들이나 다 토니 무슨도 또라 시 가르기 된도 다 토마 토니 무슨도 또비 토니 무슨도 벌고 남당 마키와 나르도 소소 토니 퇴치수고 또라 어디기 시 가르기 된도 토니 또
저 당부디라
맞습니다.
강사 디멘디시에도 샤그레세기 디멘디 이미 주센디 그 민장 다장 인장 디멘디시에 레세디 디 말에 디 주센 보고 말에
나세
이가르스 고르스나 강사디 품문가불라 티네 다장 인장 디멘디시에 레스라요 말에
나세
지부세디 시당 나세디 수장 문제지 말에 시벌 문제지 말에 이는 수신이를 땜비 취 숨바지가 문제지 거래
나세
인디가는 데멘디시에세디 시단 조단이 요래 단다 강사 데멘디시에 샤야디 수다 시바 가야 면장 아니 데멘디시에스 딜라버리 디마도베 민장 다장 인장스 말이 디나 치랑길라에디 다랑 찬도 그래 추세 다장기 추샤야마도 랑문이 두베 추요 말이 이내 다장기 추디 추레 수레 디 데멘디시 말이스
나세
한번 디제
나세 with regard to your first question, B. Oh yeah, there you are, B. With regard to your first question, Rinpoche says that actually, although the person is merely labeled, being mere name, being merely labeled, we still say that a person, well, although that being the case, the reason we say it's a non-associated compositional factor doesn't relate to that directly. It doesn't relate to that. It's not saying it's a non-associated compositional factor because it's merely labeled. Because if that were the case, well, then that would be true for water too, because water is also merely labeled as merely a name. No, that's not what it means. What it is we say a person being merely labeled on the basis of the five aggregates. Well, the person is neither form, is nothing physical. The person has something physical, but is not a physical object. And the person is not a mental object. Therefore, non-associated compositional factor means an impermanent phenomenon that is neither form nor consciousness. Now, with regard to water, water is also merely labeled on the basis of its own parts, but it's a physical object. Therefore, water is water. Water is a physical object. So even though it's merely labeled and we say it's mere name, but that doesn't mean it is not water. It is water, and therefore it's a physical object. She will continue with answering. Yeah.
senjuji tindu nyomo ba tumo mewani gombe di chima sunda di di shu sunda di la de orda nyomo be baja di je de nyomo ba da nyomo be wang gi chung ye gu song gi choba ma rong wa di je di ma zu gi sen gi gang la chima ni ba baja ni ba chima da ma zu ju zi gang la chima na bu gu ba na xin din je gi chima ma bu ji 시베 딘도 지마디 꾸이니 샤요 디강은 도스 아주 지만 항상 나부지 슈강의 슈버나신 생기 딘도 슈니 샤요 지만 나부디 망부요 다 딘제기 베 지만 나부디 차창 매버 수월라레다 뇨모 방바 자마인 버지 뇨모 바다 뇨모 베 왕기 사베 구송기 자왕님 버 디낭지 생기 딘도 샤베 바샤디 참마 자마지 수월라 생기 딘도 돈이 무슨도 통외 싫어 공부 장마인 거지 싫어 공부 디 장마인 거지 싫어 공부 디 미시버디 카도 매버 수도 그래 간스는 싫어도 미시버디 카도 문게 인상 싫어기 미시버디 미시베 민버디 세토지 이내야 생기 딘도 샤샤베 구송기 줘봐 마롱베 지마당 다나 신기 뇨모바 나수 요르다 뉘센다 자 뇨모 나수 요르 뇨모 장인데고 디기 지만 나고 디제제디 장모 수요라 생 코랑기 딘도 싫어기 차디 공피도 땅와 장마인 버지 싫어 디단지 줘봐 장부기 차디제제 변은 상부 장부 다 상주기 센티 나가 나신人的 자신부 다 디 준비 턱이 차디제제 턱이 연된 마무 요래 디제 참아 생기 강의 양도스 제고고래 가레스 나오니까 뇨모 미시베 몸바 마리버티 예베컬라 마리버티 장마세베 마리버티 콘수토베 뇨모 참아 기 지마샤고래 디제기 룡왕기 줘봐 마롱바 나주지 제요다 줘봐 마롱 나주지 단 뇨모 장마세베 베샤샤나 랑니 지부 기본적인 랑진진기 루기 지마디안 요다 랑진진기 루기 지마디안 디왕기 랑주 제 신지메를 당야기 줘봐 마롱바 딘제기 지마디안 요래 그래서 딘제기 생기 띵기 지마 참아 매고 소라 생기 띵기 지마 두자 참아 매고 소라 생기 띵기 지마 야부 참아 야부기 지마 참아 야부기 줘봐 님바당 공노 님베기 지마 참아 매고 소라 디 님부쇼라 줘봐 야부 참아당 디 지마 야부 참아 생라야 나자 슈바 나신 지마 야부 슈바 나신 슈고다 다 지마 야부 주연들이다 지마 두자디 거지 뭐베 슈기 지마 두자 참아 슈샤요 생각나 나 돈이 또 싫어기 그 싫어 장 많이 버지 싫어든지 줘봐 야부 슈기 지마 야부 슈기 지마 디 창상 생각나 샤나마 두지 카디 주워 맞다 파슈슈 마부 슈주어래 말이 공부 장 말이 디다 냥도로 마부 슈주여디가 수슈슈라는 다랑 고그레스 니 디고 저스무 페지 또스 구투에 숨지도
나스르부시 나세 아니 담아 아니
타마디 디레
아이고 나
돈이 디 시당 돈이 토마 dwi지 주주 또베 카도 디라 체시 디 시당 돈바니 담보 또디간라 나이 딘도 간사기 딘도 다 메버디 공쇼스디 다 간사기 딘도 다 유메디 추구레스 제지네 다메니 또베 고린디라 간사기 다메겐라 또 디네 추지 다메 지로 또 세디고 용자 용주 당지레 다디 페지 다랑 토는 누구어레 지더 추지 다기 이미 시버 디진군로 루 제르자스 상제 코랑 소마로 그래서 간사기 딘도 나이 딘도 나세기 딘도 다메 버디 공 디단냥도라 아니 디네 풍부기 디 풍수 센라 소베
Purified ideograph. Purified ideograph.
어떤지송 데 나이 딘도 랑심메버 고네 디네 센라 소베 풍부가 풍부신시다 풍부신가다 아니 슈르기 추지 딘도 랑심메버 공야디 리메신도 도스 또버치네 공야디 용고레스 다레디 딘제기 딘지 추지 토마토야디 추진 지기 딘도 딘라 퍼지신데 리메 추진 참마기 딘도 동니 딘라 퍼 아니 상생 총랑 신비거라 신비거수 동시 추진 더 수수기去探界的定度东北你以短大的了上当期间去探界的定度东北你了密别他希腊松这个定义的公的希腊松这个定义的举了基本那你相当举了几个今天大让公司去探界是了你讲了变得碰碰啊的大那些去的这定了point 他去几银不银呢西几出不银呢 다고 장신이 매우 인고그래스 가레스나 인디 인비 주신지레스 도시에지네 추 탄제了지 취지 미바 다 리리리젠 차상의 미고 말다 추 탄제들의 인고도 미 탄제 디오디오바도 두냐미 디오바레스 가수세나 코나신 오 디다비 취지 추 탄제지 딘도 동반이 공회디 공그레스 어디런데
Most definitely. Most. Now, with regard to your next question, Rinpoche says, that's an important question. That's a very important question that you ask. Well, with regard to eliminating cognitive obscurations, well, our obscurations, our cognitive obscurations, well, where do they come from? They come from our afflictive emotions. The afflictive emotions, since beginning this time, they leave something behind. They leave something behind besides the afflictive emotions arising again and again. They also leave behind what are called imprints or some kind of residue, if you like. So they're left behind on the mind. So it's almost like a smell when you have a dirty object. So the dirty object leaves behind some smell. It's described like a smell, or it's something that covers the mind. It's spread all over the mind. And to overcome that, it's not enough. It's not enough just to meditate on emptiness, because just meditating on emptiness, well, what happens is we just eliminate the misperception of reality, because those are in direct opposition. The mind realizing emptiness with regard to its object, it's in direct opposition to misapprehension, that is the grasping at inherent existence, and you eliminate that by just meditating on directly perceiving it. So when you directly realize emptiness, that becomes an antidote to the afflictive emotions, in the sense to the root of those afflictive emotions, which is ignorance, the misapprehension of reality. But that mind will not be able, it will be able to eliminate, just in itself, will be able to eliminate the misapprehension that is ignorance and all the other afflictions that arise from it. But that smear, that cover on the mind, it's not able to touch that. So what do you need now? What do you need now? You need to engage. You need to, in other words, Rinpoche basically said, you need to cover the mind with a new smear, if you like. So in other words, all these negative actions that we engaged in, the actions we accumulated, and of course, the causes of those, the afflictive emotions, they kind of covered our mind with this cover of smear, with this kind of, there's these imprints, if you want to call them that, or these obscurations to Buddhahood. And now you need to engage, and they're all the smell was left by the self-grasping or by the self-centered attitude. Now the opposite to that is cherishing others. And now you engage in this extensive conduct, motivational conduct that leads to certain actions of body, speech, and mind. So it's almost like you replace this one smear with another, or you cover the mind now with these extensive actions. And if you do that, with covering it with these extensive actions, and you meditate on emptiness, then you're able to also remove the smear. So Rinpoche said that's his opinion on how merely meditating on emptiness is not enough. You need bodhicitta, and that is not just bodhicitta, but these extensive actions that arise from these very extensive actions that leave behind another cover, another smear on the mind. And in that way, those cognitive obscurations can be removed. That was this one part of your question. And the last part is, well, when you start meditating on emptiness, when you start focusing on it and realizing it, well, as mentioned before, it's a conceptual mind that realizes it. You start with the I, then you take the five aggregates, and then from there you look at other phenomena around you in the world and meditate on them. So you start off with certain objects. That's how it's described in the text. But then as you become better at it and you become more familiar with this, and you move through the different paths, well, during the last moment on the path of preparation, which is called the Supreme Dharma, the last moment of that, actually, what is the object of focus? Because a moment later, you realize emptiness directly. You move on to the direct realization, but you enter into this meditative absorption, realizing emptiness conceptually, and that mind then turns into the direct perception. Now, what do you focus on? You focus on all phenomena. You focus on all phenomena, and then realize their emptiness conceptually until this mind turns into a direct perception of all phenomena lacking inherent existence. But what does that mean, all phenomena? Well, it includes the 5 aggregates, it includes external phenomena, it includes everything. But does that mean you have to focus on each and every phenomenon? No, that's not what it means. It means basically, to this conceptual mind, it is like, well, whatever exists, because it lacks and because it is dependently arisen, therefore, so based on that reasoning, therefore, it is empty of inherent existence. So just getting a general sense that whatever there is, it doesn't exist inherently, based on, of course, previously having taken to mind the fact that it exists independence. So it's a bit like when you focus on all sentient beings and you generate compassion, just as an example, you're not thinking of each and every sentient being, but it's rather the sense to the mind, whatever sentient being there is, I want to free them from suffering. So here, whatever exists, it doesn't exist inherently. This is how it seems. This is the sense to the mind, and that conceptual mind then turns into a direct perception.
Chimansi Puge Nando Tanda, Nomobi Chimansi, smells Egi, Mazuna Nando, Tregichima, Tijibu Mare, and the Chimansi depending on Shukabuchina, Shukabuganga, Subachimguina, Dilla Chimasiri.
No say.
Zulu Kuikabuchi in a Kuikabu Diganga, Nanti Sunich. Diganga Nabusunchunguba in a Diganga Chimanguisha. I think also down a Shiguganga. Nabusun Dama the Chibat in a Mambu quitting until I had Chimandu Chimandu Siri. Madi Singi Johnson Chila Court.
No say. So actually the word tima, as I translated it as smell, but Rinpoche says, well, it means smell, but it has other meanings. It has different meanings. So it kind of, you talk about also smell, not just the smell that you smell with your nose, but also when there's some dirt and you leave behind some impurity, some filth on a piece of paper, that is also described as this tima. So it's some kind of filth, some defilement, some taint, if you like. Or if you leave something behind on your clothing, like a taint, T-A-I-N-T, so taint, some taint left, some filth, some impurity. So in the similar way, here this tima, or this defilement, if you like a taint and a defilement, that is left on the mind. And so this is what's meant with this here, not like a smell, but rather like a defilement left on the mind, like it covers, it's a smear and an impurity left.
Thank you so much, Rinpoche. We have a few more questions, but I think we keep for next time. Thank you so much, everybody. Sashi perke chokche me tram re rap ling zini de gyampa di sangye zingdo mikte o wai prokunam dak zing la chupa shok. May my Venerable Lama's life be firm, his wide divine actions spread in the 10 directions. May the torch of the teachings of Losang always remain, dispelling the darkness of all beings in the 3 realms. Idam Guratna Mandalakam Nyayatayami. Jangchok Semchok Rinpoche, Makya Panam Kyegyoche, Kyapanyam Pame Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pelwa Shok. Kanri Rawe Kowe Shinkam Dia, Pendang Dewa Malu Junwe Ne, Shenre Zegwan Tenzing Gyatsui, Sape Si De Bardu Tengyochi. Thank you so much, Rinpoche.
Thank you.
See you next week. Thank you.
We have more 2 times or 1? 2.
2, Rinpoche. Thank you so much, Rinpoche.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Rinpoche. Thank you so much, Geshe-la. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining.
Sorry,
And please
sorry, come in.
yes.
Can I just
yes,
interrupt?
Geshe-la.
Just
Of
to
course.
write down maybe Poon King and Marco.
Yes,
That we
I
have them
Yeah.
first. Okay, great. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So please remember, if you still had questions, please bring them tomorrow, maybe to Geshe-la's session tomorrow, 4 o'clock. We have a review, summary, question and answer session, an amazing one with Geshe Kelsang Wangmo. Don't miss this very special opportunity to, catch hold of her. We don't do that often. And Geshe-la has to excuse me. She's looking down. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. And I hope that gave you lots of, fruit for thought. And see you tomorrow. And we also want to advertise our Medicine Buddha retreat that starts on Monday. We usually have an annual Medicine Buddha retreat residentially at Tushita, but in these special times we have it online. So the first time, and in the sense of online, hopefully the last time. Of course, we hope that we have the retreat many times, but online just this time. So if you're interested, especially in these times of the pandemic, to help yourself, others, the world, this is a very special opportunity as well. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a beautiful Saturday and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you so much, Geshe-la.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.